Yeah, how's it going, Chad? What's up with you?
Doing good. Yeah, excited to go through these updates. A lot of stuff kind of happening and a lot more coming. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, first thing is Atom. So Atom was supposed to be released on Tuesday, and it was like on time, but there was a small issue with, there's just basically a small bug where transactions wouldn't be processed correctly because, it didn't recognize mainnet. It thought that it could only work on testnet and stagenet, so that like it was a bug that couldn't be found on mainnet. So Atom trading was paused, and there's a fix coming out in the next version of THORnode, which is 1.93. So that should be out later this week or early next week. It's the next update. So after all the nodes adopt the next update, then we should see trading live for Atom and also LP action. So you'll be able to add liquidity and get in there. Hey, what's up, Chad?
Yo, what's up, guys?
Hey,
What's up?
So I was just giving an update on Atom starting out there. So that should be live next week for liquidity ads and swaps, and then we can finally start this multi-chain journey in the Cosmos ecosystem, and that'll be really cool. I saw your guys' interview with Crypto Cedo the other day. Chad Barraford and Mogarkey were up on his YouTube channel. That was a really good interview, actually. I enjoyed that one a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was fun to kind of engage more with the Cosmos community, right? Because I feel like we don't talk to them as much as we probably should, but it was great to get some time with them.
Same. Yeah, I really enjoyed listening to that. Kind of liked you getting into the weeds with IBC and all of that, and just like really making that stuff clear to the Cosmos ecosystem, because it does feel like sometimes there's like just misunderstandings of THORChain and how it kind of plays in. So we definitely need to get the word out to the cosmonauts.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
There's actually a Cosmos conference in Colombia, in South America, in September, I think. So if anyone's interested in that one, that seems like a very interesting opportunity for Cosmos builders to get together. So maybe Colombia in September.
Maybe I'll check in with some things first and see if I got the time.
So maybe on the Atom launch, can we walk through just like the process a bit? Because I know in like past chains we've kind of had like the treasury seeding the pools and things like that to kick it off. So like how does that like step by step going to play out now that it's mainnet?
Yeah, I think like having a slight difference in the process of that will likely change. I think historically speaking, the core team basically like use Mimir admin to kind of like facilitate the adding of a new chain, and then use the treasury to kind of like kickstart the chain so that we have some decent liquidity on day one. But obviously, as we go towards mainnet and we get more towards decentralization, we don't want the core team to be part of that process, like and hands-on as much. We want that to be kind of done by the community in general. So I think at least my thinking going forward on these things is that like when we want to add a new chain, let's just call it like AVAX, for example, there'll be a symbolic vote on chain from the nodes, saying, okay, let's add AVAX, yay or nay. And then once a 2/3 majority is reached, let's just say that it was adopted, like, we want to add AVAX, then the chain client and the infrastructure to run an AVAX full node would like all land on chain at the same time. And like all the validators would just start spinning up their AVAX node and syncing up to the tip and making like observations about the network fee, like how much it costs to transact on AVAX. And then once a 2/3 majority of validators reach a consensus on the network fee, that's just a way of signaling to the network saying, okay, we're now ready. Like, we are observing, we have a consensus on this chain. We're now ready to start like taking in transactions, blah, 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 swaps, add liquidities, whatever. And then the network will just add, just like dynamically add, usually we wait for a churn to do this, but you don't have to do that. And so we just dynamically add AVAX to the list of chains that are supported, which is actually slightly better to do it not associated with the churn, because when a churn happens, there's the actual churn itself of like moving all the funds. And so you're signing all these transactions to move all the funds from the old Asgard vaults to the new Asgard vaults. And at the same time, you're getting like a huge, YOLO of swaps and trades and added liquidities and withdrawals and whatever else is happening, like all at the same time, which kind of puts kind of like two things happening at the same time, which kind of not overloads, but just puts additional pressure on the two-step signing. So instead, like, we'll just have a symbolic vote. The community will kind of vote on that. When they, come to an agreement, we'll just launch the code base changes. Everybody will just pull them down and run them. And then once the networks kind of spin up their AVAX node and get a consensus on what's happening in terms of the fee, the network will just churn in AVAX, and then we'll start trading. And so anybody can create the initial pool. Anybody can add liquidity or swaps or whatever. I'm not sure if it'll be the actual Treasury doing that in the future or not. Or at least it won't be the one that's kicking off. Like, Treasury can become an LP if they want to, of course. But like, it won't be like necessarily the first transaction.
Wouldn't you still need to wait for a churn to happen in order to create a vault for a new chain or a new coin, though?
No, you actually don't. So when you actually do a churn or the keygen process, what's actually happening underneath the hood is that you have all these different validators coming together to generate a new pub key, right? So if you think about it, like, this is like a little like quick lesson in cryptography, but like when you think about these kind of elliptical curve cryptography, which we all use in crypto, like, you have at the very base layer, you have you could call it the, let's see here, you call it the seed phrase, right? That's like the very base layer, and then from the seed phrase you can generate like a private key, right? And from the private key you generate a pub key, and then from the pub key you can generate addresses, right? Like your OX address or BC1 address or whatever. And so all the network is trying to do in a keygen is just to agree upon what the new pub key is, right? Everybody gets a part of the private key in a matter of speaking. And so once you have the pub key, you can generate the BC1 address from that pub key. It doesn't matter which chain we're talking about. We can generate an Atom address. We can generate a Bitcoin address, a Tether, or like, it doesn't matter. Like, even chains that don't even exist yet, you can theoretically generate an address to send those funds to. So you don't necessarily need to do a churn. We just kind of did that. We were using the churn as kind of a mechanism to signify that this vault is now supporting this asset class or this asset. But from a technological perspective, that's not really necessarily needed.
Yeah, great. So it sounds like a lot of this process can just kind of be automated with the regular flow of the network. I guess you just need some logic in there to make that happen, and then it can start happening without any kind of Mimir settings besides the original vote.
Yeah, I think before we would use Mimir settings to kind of like walk it down that line in a sense, and I don't think it's really necessarily needed to do that going forward anymore. Especially, it was nice to do that in the beginning because it was the first change we were adding. We wanted to be kind of more cautious about doing it, but I think we've done it a few times now. We're feeling more good and more confident about the process and how reliable it is. And so I think going forward, the network will just, through a software update, it'll just take in the new changes. And then once the nodes are all start observing the chain, Bob's your uncle. Go ahead.
Cool. So we should see Atom live next week then. And that's very exciting. And we already talked about that last week, so I don't think we need to go crazy into Atom, but it'll be great to finally get that community in with THORChain, especially with all the aggregator stuff coming up. It's everything just kind of comes together all at the same time and builds towards the same goal. So that'll be really cool. Also, Eridonis has told me that the swap in and swap out aggregator function for AVAX is coming along really nicely. So that'll be ready to go for the release of Avalanche on THORChain, and I believe that'll be rolling out to StageNet in the next release. So we should be seeing AVAX on StageNet really, really soon, and that'll be shipped with the aggregator function to basically swap to any C-chain token in or out.
Yeah, that's going to be like baller, because now we're going to have you can theoretically swap from some DEX on AVAX to some DEX on Ethereum or anything in between, like BTC and Doge and whatever. So like, that's just like, to me, I'm super excited about this. This is gonna be like a game changer. This is like fulfilling kind of like the holy grail of spot trading in crypto, which is basically like you can go to a single UI and have access to like everything, like all the assets, and it becomes so clean, so simple, so easy to use, all one transaction. You don't need to hold like multiple things, understand different bridges, blah blah blah, whatever. Just like simple UI, you can get whatever you want. at that time. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, it really makes THORChain exponentially more useful just to like the end user, because now instead of just like having to get into the L1 asset using some other DEX or doing whatever else, like once DEX aggregation is kind of played out, then it's just anything to anything in whichever DEX has actually integrated that, and so much less jumping around, and just that allows for so much more liquidity, so much more swap volume to run through THORChain. So huge.
Yeah, a great example of that right now is Rango Exchange. Rango Exchange is absolutely killing it with the aggregator. They have a lot of different chains implemented already. I think they're probably the most advanced in that respect. They have a bunch of different bridges integrated along with THORChain, and like they're not very well known, but those guys are absolutely killing it in the aggregator space. In especially utilizing THORChain to make everything as decentralized as possible, even though, it's still using bridges and things like that. But you can hop across a lot of different ecosystems using Rango. And I just pinned up a tweet from Mogarky from THORswap about the DEX aggregator coming up. So it's looking like this feature is like very close to actually seeing the light of day and being released, which is, and that's what we're all here for. We're just waiting for this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Rango's killing. I think DeFi Spot's also killing too. I think they just tweeted out about having like 40 plus chains integrated like in their UI, which is pretty sick.
Yeah, I think they were saying like by some time frame, but that'll be cool to see. That Mogarky teaser is pretty cool, seeing it like on THORswap, like using all the ERC20s through Uni, Sushi, 0x 1 inch. So that one's like really close. Like hopefully we see that live pretty soon.
Yeah, I think like everything's working. I think they're just gonna flip this. All they gotta do is just flip the switch, So it's like super close.
Yeah, it's just been UI work, but it's been done for quite a bit. So just been fine tuning the UI, but yeah, based on that teaser, it looks like it's pretty much here. So hopefully we see that live really soon.
Can you swap in and out with the aggregator implementation, or can you only swap out? Like, can you? That's the question.
Yeah, both directions. So to BDC, from BDC, whatever. Like it all just works, which is just insane. Like, and I'm super excited about like just getting more. Like THORswap and DeFi Spot and Rango, like they're all doing great, and they're killing it. But I also would love to see just other DEXs that are not necessarily specifically related to our ecosystem, like some random DEX on Ethereum or some random DEX on AVAX or whatever, and just have them integrate too. Because then it becomes like the amount of trade volume that happens on the THORChain network just like grows in a significant amount, just because you're channeling all the swap trade volume of some other DEX, and you're just integrating directly into THORChain's liquidity pools, which is just going to generate huge volume and yield for the LPs and the nodes of the network, which is just like beyond sick.
100%. Yeah. Wallet integrations too. Like if you can just do those swaps directly through some, like hypothetically Trust Wallet or Ledger Live, something like that would be super epic and drive so much volume.
Here's the funny thing about Ledger Live. I'm gonna shit on Ledger Live just for a brief second, but I have mad respect for them, so don't take it too negative. But like they made this like huge announcement. They're like super excited that they've integrated with FTX, and you can just like trade on Ledger Live with FTX without needing to like log in or whatever, because it just like you get the KYC your wallet address and like all that kind of stuff. And I'm just thinking to myself like, oh come on, man, like you're missing the boat. Like, what are you talking about? What are you doing? Really? Okay, sure.
Yeah, it's like missing the point on some level. So I didn't look into that too deeply. So you're basically like using your Ledger hardware wallet, but then you're trading through a centralized exchange on the back end.
Yeah, so you can log into your FTX account on basically Ledger Live, and you can it just routes it through your FTX account basically. So you can you have Bitcoin in your account. It basically sends it into the FTX address, makes the swap, and then sends it out to your ETH address or whatever it is you're swapping for.
Yeah.
I think I'm not even sure if you even have to log in on your Ledger. I think you can just like register your BDC address or something like this, and then when you send in assets to FTX, it knows who you are because it's from your wallet address, which is associated with your account. So I don't think you have to actually log in with your like name and password. I think I could be wrong, but like I found it a bit funny because it just seemed like they were excited about this whole new integration thing. I'm just like, okay. I mean, that would have been great, maybe 3 years ago. That probably would have been really interesting, but nope, not anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to get there one day with THORChain for sure. Cause like, especially as like more regulation moves into this space, and it's so obvious that the use case for THORChain fits right there into just native swaps from your ledger, one address to another address. I mean, it's obvious to us, so it'll get there eventually. It's the best solution out there right now, but. Especially companies like Ledger, they're slow moving, and I'm sure money talks when it comes to things like FTX integration. So,
what, I like my little wish list of like what I would love to see somebody build, and maybe THORSwap is already working on this with their Pathfinder API they're going to be working on. But like when you're trying to swap between two assets on two different chains or within a chain or whatever, that like have an API where you can figure out different ways of getting there that are both shows that this like decentralized ways and the centralized ways of doing it, and then showing like the price differences between the centralized methodology and the decentralized methodology, and like what is the actual like price. I'm curious to know what the price difference is, right? Like how it actually maps out, because I think in the long term, as THORChain's pools get like deeper and deeper and deeper, there's no lower bound on how cheap a trade can get, right? Like it's literally near zero, and so like centralized exchanges cannot really compete with that, like because they have overhead and they have like operations and they have lawyers and everything else they got to pay for, and like so they can't actually do that. And so like it's just to me it's like an inevitability, although not so much in the short, but like in the longer term, like as THORChain gets more and more adoption and more liquidity, like it would just become cheaper, faster, more convenient, and respects your privacy over a centralized thing, which is like more clicks, more time, sign up, KYC, like all this kind of crap.
Hey, I brought Citizen up if you have something to say.
Yeah, I'll do a quick chat B on Ledger Live, but this time Travis on THORChain. I love THORChain, but I'll shit on it for a little bit, so don't take it seriously. Last time so Chad announced like the THORChain.com went live, and I went up there and I was getting excited to start playing with it, and then none of the links worked. And then this time I go to THORSwap because I got excited that THORChain finally adopted or linked to Atom, but Atom swaps are not available. Still, I just checked today. So what's going on with that?
Well, if there's any broken links on the website, like let us know, like, tweet at us or whatever. You also want to get that fixed for the Atom as Kyle was saying earlier, that there was a bug discovered that wouldn't allow trades to go through just because of some bugs. So a fix is coming out in the next release, which is version 1.93. So it should go live probably, this weekend or next week.
Thanks.
Yeah, and and on the THORSwap UI, like there's automatic banners when like a chain is paused, things like that. So it's not giving you all of the details that Chad just did, but it's showing you like, hey, something's kind of not operational on the THORChain side, and picking that up automatically and showing that it's paused. So it's not something like THORSwap is like blocking you from doing. It's just that like it's not active on THORChain right now. So just have to wait there. But yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for the clarification. I know that I don't know the name behind THORChain or THORSwap hoster, but there's other chat. You guys are like one of the most friendliest, most welcoming folks. So when a lot of these application interfaces and UI UXs get worked out, I will definitely send my students and my people because I don't want to frustrate them because some buttons are not working, things like that. But on the side note, I just decided to roll up my sleeve and to contribute to Web3 generally as a whole. I'm nobody in Twitter space or Web3 yet, but I'm trying to do everything I can, put my time and energy that I have. I'm free 24/7 now, and so I'm trying to contribute to it. I talked to Zaki, and he has decided to come on board in a one-to-one. Kind of like a Charlie Rose Alex Friedman. I'm no Charlie Rose, but in a very one-to-one focused conversation with the founders and creators and community members and validators, all the folks that are involved. So anybody here, Chad B or Chad, other Chad or any host that wants to come in and tell us their story as a person, human story, how they arrived on Web3. And I think this kind of format, more so than a technical like insider or nuances, I think this would open up more venues for public to come in a more welcoming way, because it will kind of reveal the personal side of the story of Chad B or Zaki or any of the founders in Web3 space on a one-to-one base. And so it'll be in Twitter space so that it's easy for people to get access and do, but most likely it's going to be more like a time capsule, a monologue, and a memoir of that individual that I invite. So please come and join me and let us have a one-on-one conversation for crypto newbies to get to know you guys individually.
Well, so for me, I wouldn't want to do it just because I'm not trying to build my personal people to understand me as an individual. Like I talk publicly so people can learn more about me and my history and who I am as an individual person, but more I talk publicly just to kind of to explain, educate, promote, talk about what THORChain is, its value, contribution to the world, and why it's really important for people to be aware of it and utilize it and all these kind of things. So like for me, I wouldn't do it. Maybe Zach would be interested in that, but for me, it's not what I'm trying to accomplish in the space personally.
Well, thanks for that clarification. But I do personally find you quite interesting. Like when I see you playing pianos, and I don't know, it's just the human side. And I think in some time, especially in crypto space, we get kind of a little bit too caught up in technology and money, and a lot of people connect with others and bond. And like I personally, when I discovered Web3 in 2016, it wasn't through technology. I'm an architect, design engineer. I'm good enough with technology, but I'm not a computer scientist, and so there's no bridge there. But it was through discovering Vitalik as a person, and what this 19-year-old kid was up to. And I was watching YouTube videos on him for 3 months to figure out what the hell this blockchain technology was. I couldn't wrap my brains around it. And through that time of watching him, more than the technologies and anything, it was really about that guy, about that kid that I connected with. And obviously his ideas and visions that I resonated with. But I think it's important. So I think, if not now, I would hope that you would consider that in the future. Thanks.
No worries. Thanks for coming up.
Sweet. Thanks, man. Yeah, man, I was thinking of something during the middle of that, but I kind of forgot what it was now. But yeah, thanks for coming up. And yeah, we enjoy doing these, weekly things and making them accessible to everybody to help people understand what THORChain is, what it is accomplishing in this space, and kind of what the value is, what the ideals behind it are. So we enjoy always doing these. So yeah, moving on. Also in the next update, there's a new feature that'll let you LP with any asset. So like if you want to join the Bitcoin LP, but you only have ETH or something like that, you can just supply the ETH. It'll basically do a swap on the back end and put it into the Bitcoin pool. So just another feature to make LPing more accessible.
Oh, sorry. So correction there. That was the initial intent of it, and then after discussions with team members, like that, the concern with that was because you're not supplying a trade like a swap limit, you could like put an ETH, you don't have a swap limit, so the price gets shifted underneath your feet, and then you start LPing at a lower amount. And so there was a change made where like it would allow you. It's only going to work for layer one BDC to like a synthetic, and a synthetic to a layer one BDC, like a synthetic BDC to a layer one BDC. That was that initially was going to be more of a wide scoping change, but then like after discussions with like the team, it felt it was just safer for the community to just only allow for layer one to send to layer one of the same asset. Because we needed to do this. This is like a stepping stone to be able to do single-sided liquidity. We needed this kind of capability so people can provide BDC, gets swapped to synth gets locked up into a pool, aka a vault, and then earn that yield, and then extract from the synthetic back to BC1 address without ever actually having a Thor address or Rune or or any of these things. We wanted to make sure that you could do this without actually leaving your Bitcoin wallet.
Wait, so I'm a little confused. So what exactly is possible as of 1.93 with single-sided? Like, is it, this is a stepping stone towards single-side exposure?
Yeah. So the reason why the change was made was that we wanted so that in order to do single-sided liquid, like yield-bearing synthetics and you'll earn yield on just one asset, was you needed to like acquire synthetic, right? But in order to acquire synthetic, you need to have a Thor address, right? Which is like, that creates a little bit of a barrier to entry for like Bitcoiners to be able to utilize this feature. And so initially we just realized we needed a mechanism so that you could swap and add, right? In a single transaction, just like throw in one asset, swap it to the asset that you need, and then add liquidity to the pool, blah, 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 whatever. And then initially we're going to do it in a way that like it would work for, any asset to any asset, whatever. But then we just kind of changed it later on and said like, well, it's a little bit safer just to just do like layer one to the layer one synthetic version of that back and forth. So the feature's not really, it doesn't allow you to really do anything differently than you can't do already in terms of that change. It's just laying down the framework or the foundation to make the next step of single-sided like yield, which the next step is being able to enter and exit the pool, the vault with a synthetic. And then the next step of that one would be the actual yield part of it and generating the actual yield part. So it's just being done in pieces rather than like one large code change.
Gotcha. So it's basically just like how you would mint a synth right now, except that you can do it without a Thor address. Yeah,
basically, because right now, if you would mint a synth now, you need to have some Bitcoin, some like layer one BTC, and then you need to have a Thor address to send that synthetic to. So you need to have both addresses in order for that to really work. But within the context of like a single asset LPing or with yield bearing synthetics, blah, 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 that we didn't want you to have to have two wallet addresses, a BC1 and a Thor1 address. We wanted you just to reduce the actual obstacles to become an LP on a single sided. We wanted to say like, okay, you just need to have just a BC1 address to get BTC yield. And so instead of swapping that synthetic to your own personal Thor1 address, it's effectively swapping it to a protocol owned, module that's holding it on your behalf, and effectively. And then whenever you're ready to withdraw, you just send some BTC dust at the network and say, hey, withdraw, give me my BTC. And then it'll just swap that synthetic back to BC1 and send it to your BC1 address. And so you just maintain that single address that you need to have and maintain.
So will you be able to hold like different assets, like say synthetic ETH? Would you be able to hold that on your BC1 address? That's really interesting.
Yeah, that's effectively what's happening there. You won't be able to like transfer it to somebody like some other Thor address. Like, so if you basically acquire some synthetic via your BC1 address and the network is kind of holding on your behalf because you don't have a Thor address, you can't later on say, oh, go ahead and take my synthetic BTC and transfer it to, Chad THOReau at this other Thor1 address, blah, blah, blah. You wouldn't be able to do that. You'd have to, extract the value back to your BC1 address and then swap it back to a synthetic to your own Thor address and then transfer it to them, which is less than ideal. But like, that's not the purpose of this, is not to have a custodian. It's more of the idea that the network is just holding it on your behalf and to generate that yield for you and then giving it back to you whenever you want it.
That's cool. Yeah. It seems like actually a really important detail to like allow THORChain to kind of disappear behind the scenes in making like the single-sided yield just really accessible and all these various apps or integrations, because then, yeah, people can just like show up with Bitcoin and earn yield. Like they don't need to be like, oh, I need a Rune address. I need to, get another wallet or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, right. And that's the reason why you don't need to buy Rune to be able to swap from Bitcoin to ETH, right? Like it's designed that way just to create as minimal barriers to entry as possible to have this little excuses of why you're not swapping on THORChain. Like, oh, I don't want to have to buy a Rune to be able to swap Bitcoin to ETH, right? Like that's a kind of we're trying to avoid that. And same thing, conceptually the same thing here. We're just trying to make it as simple as possible to remove as many excuses or reasons why you wouldn't use it, just to allow as many people to use it as possible.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Really, really cool. I was thinking about that a couple of weeks ago, just like with THORChain being able to hold basically different assets with a address that's not of that chain. So like, I mean, obviously this isn't exactly that, but that's a very interesting concept. And yeah, that leads right into single-sided yield. So everyone's excited for that.
Yeah, that actually, like, there was an idea a while back that we haven't gone too depths to explore, but like, imagine a hypothetical scenario where you have some BDC and you want to become a staker in the, Thor, like you want to acquire some VThor because you think it's going to be, cool and stuff, but you don't have an OS address and you don't have any Thor, and like you don't really necessarily feel the need to actually acquire an OS address and do all that process. Like, imagine a hypothetical scenario where you just send the network some BDC, the network, swaps it to, Thor, and then stakes it for you on your behalf, and then you have that yield coming in from the VThor, blah, 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 all that's happening. And then later on, when you want to like extract your value, you send another Bitcoin transaction with a little dust amounts. And then you just like, hey, give me back my value now. And then the network will like unstake the VThor, convert it into Thor, swap the Thor into BDC, and then send the BDC back to your BC1 address. And so you effectively were exposed to whatever you want to be exposed with, but never actually holding ETH for gas, never holding an OX address, or never technically even holding Thor. The network's just all doing that, abstracting that away for you.
Yeah, that's super cool. It makes my mind start going to like all the things that could be like built around that just to simplify user experience. So it'll be really cool to see like everything that kind of pops up around that. Cool. Should we move on to Luvi?
Yeah. So we just put out an article this week on the THORChain Medium. It's about Luvi, which is, well, I guess we'll go into that in a second, but it's about Luvi and how APR is calculated on Midgard on THORChain. So Midgard is basically a middleware layer on THORChain that supplies data that's derived from THORnode data. So that's where things like THORswap pull in the price of Rune and the price of every other asset, because as people know in THORChain, everything's denoted in Rune. There's no actual US dollar prices, but things like Midgard are used to calculate the APYs of pools, and also the price of assets, and other like numerical things like that that aren't just part of the regular THORnode software. So there's an update to Midgard that updated the way that APRs are calculated on the endpoint there. So check out the pinned tweet on the top of this space, and has a link to the Medium article about this. And it goes into what Luvi is. Luvi stands for Liquidity Unit Value Index, and it's basically it's a normalized number that tracks the value of a liquidity unit over time. And by tracking the value of a one liquidity unit over time, you can use that to estimate the yield that a LP experiences in the pool. So it's kind of a complicated concept. So definitely check out the article. And people have questions about Luvi. It's a kind of difficult to wrap your head around, and especially how synthetic assets affect Luvi and therefore affect the yield that an LP experiences. So definitely check it out to understand better about Luvi and how the APY on THORChain is actually calculated. And you can use the Midgard endpoint to check what the APY would be, basically using the last 30 days of data, the last 100 days of data, the last 6 months of data. So it's really useful to look at that in terms of Luvi rather than just the net profit to the pool itself. It's more useful for an individual LP.
Yeah, I just pinned a tweet to the thing here if you want to read the article and get more information. It's up there.
Well, yeah, I definitely think there's room to figure out how to simplify this to make it easily understandable. Shout out to LP University. I'm sure those guys are working on some stuff with that. But yeah, I need to dive in deeper myself and really get my head around it. But I think the key thing is just like the goal with it is to make the APRs displayed across any THORChain ecosystem app just be more true and fair and like make more real sense to what's happening. So it's all just to be really like transparent and more make sense in the end. So a good move towards that.
Yeah, and something like this is kind of necessary with something like synths, because synths do affect the yield of the pools, because especially with the changing prices of Rune and the other asset in the pools. So those ratios affect Luvi, and that therefore affects the yields that an LPer actually gets. So if you don't understand Luvi, it's really interesting. If you don't, then all you need to know is that Luvi is what's used to calculate the APRs of the pools in THORChain. It took me like 2 weeks to understand that, like to really understand what Luvi is, to like actually get this article out. So if you don't understand it, that's all right. It's just it's just the new way of things to better understand how LPs get their yield. So moving on from that, people can request to come up if they have questions. And while people are requesting to come up, I don't know if you want to talk about single-sided yield or anything else that you want to talk about, Chad, while people are requesting.
Yeah. I mean, the single-sided yields, I think, is massive. I think it's going to be one of the holy grails we've been thinking about since the beginning of the project. And this is probably in my view, it's probably one of the biggest deals that we've done as a project. So I'm super excited about it. But if anybody has any questions, welcome to come up and haggle me here.
Yeah, I'll ask one on it while we wait for requests. Just kind of like, what's the process going to be for like testing it? Like, is it going to have to go through a pretty long StageNet testing, or is it like a more safe upgrade that might be shorter to push through? Like, what can we kind of expect just as far as the rollout?
Good question. Testing, we'll have to test it on StageNet for a period of time, make sure it all like runs and works well. We'll have to implement a lot of like really strong unit tests, plentiful unit tests to make sure everything functions correctly. And then make sure that behaviorally it behaves the way that it should in terms of like the reserve adding and withdrawing Rune to the pools when it deems it needs to be done. I'm not sure. We haven't actually talked about as a team yet, like about the idea of like if we're going to put a cap on this or not, like we've done in the past of like on this particular feature, like only allow so much BDC or so much percentage of the depth of the pools be single-sided, just to kind of like start small and make sure everything works right, and then scale it up over time or what. So we haven't actually had that conversation yet. Actually, come to think of it, probably should, but it should move relatively faster than what we're used to, because what we're testing here is not so much the chains, but we're testing here business logic, and business logic is much simpler and easier to test for than like integrating with a new chain.
Awesome. Yeah. I was thinking about caps as well. I mean, it seems like a good idea. I would think, just to make everyone feel safer, if nothing more. So, yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, while there's no one requesting here, do you mind if I run through the proposal for this single-sided yield thing, and you correct me if there's any mistakes here, just to test my own understanding of it? Yeah. So just feel free to cut in if I make any mistakes here. So with this single-sided yield feature, you can mint a synthetic asset. I think probably starting with just BTC and ETH maybe, and then maybe expanding to other chains in the future.
I think the intention right now is that like it'll support just the gas assets, like the primary asset per chain.
Got it. So primary assets per chain, you can mint a synthetic asset and lock it into a pool and receive up to 50% of the yield that a regular LP would experience. So there's some other incentive pendulum that would swing from 0 to 50%. So 50% of the regular LP yield being the max. And obviously synthetic assets are capped on the network to a percentage of the total depth of a liquidity pool. So there would be some kind of target synthetic asset utilization rate. Like right now, the cap is 15%. So say we set that cap to 10%. If the synthetic asset utilization goes over 10%, then the reserve starts putting in Rune into that pool to increase the depth, and it does that until the target synthetic asset utilization is met. And it also takes assets out of the pools if that synthetic asset utilization is under. So the reserve basically enters and exits the pools dynamically to maintain a certain synthetic asset utilization. So it's basically putting the reserve in to take some of the risk off of regular LPs for the the single-sided asset depositors.
Yep, and that's supposed to make it so that if you want to acquire more synths, you can always do so, because of the synth caps at 15%, and the network reserve is just pushing everything basically towards 10%. And so, as soon as somebody adds more synths, the network comes in, allowing more synths to be added, blah blah blah. And so that always gives space for people to kind of come in, assuming that the pools themselves are not 100% full and hit the hard caps.
Great. I was trying to make sure that I understand it completely.
No, that's it in a nutshell. I mean, it's quite simple in many respects. The feature itself actually isn't all that difficult to build from an engineering perspective, to be honest with you. It's just this reworks and rewiring to do in some sense. But a lot of the code that we're using for this purpose is we're just reusing code that already exists, right? Using the add liquidity, withdraw liquidity code they already have. Instead of adding liquidity to a pool, you're adding liquidity to a vault, which is the same thing, except one has two assets and the other one has one asset. And so the math is a bit different, but the logic is the same.
Sweet. Are there any questions from the audience? People can hit the button in the bottom left to request to come up, ask anything about single-sided yield, DEX aggregation, Atom, AVAX, somebody.
Bringing up Joseph connecting.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing me up. I kind of just jumped on this. I was wondering about the impermanent loss protection. If I put in a certain amount of Bitcoin, and after those 100 days, will I be able to pull out the same amount of Bitcoin if Rune drops a lot?
So if you add only Bitcoin,
yeah.
So if you add only Bitcoin, think of it like swapping half of that Bitcoin for Rune. And then that 50-50 start point is your snapshot for protection. So let's say you put in one Bitcoin, that's really like putting in half a Bitcoin and 10,000 Rune or whatever it is. So then you basically, after 100 days, the value that you're protected against is 0.5 BTC and 10,000 Rune.
Okay.
So what you would be withdrawing minimum would be equivalent value to whatever today's value is of 0.5 BTC and 10,000 Rune. But it could be a different ratio of the two assets just due to the rebalancing. But it would be equivalent to having held from that 50-50 start point, worst case. So that's what your protection is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm just still a little confused by because as soon as you put in the single asset of Bitcoin, it swaps automatically. So basically, you have the same dollar amount as you would in the beginning of just putting in that one Bitcoin. So now Bitcoin goes down, Rune goes down maybe a little bit more, but you still started with the same dollar amount of Bitcoin. So when you go to pull out the single asset of Bitcoin, I don't understand why it wouldn't be the same. Oh, because you're actually starting with the half of it in Rune. Okay.
Yeah, the whole single-sided feature that we've been kind of chatting a little about, the single-sided yield, is specifically for this case that you're actually kind of asking about. Of in that case, there's no IL, right, and there's no need for ILP, right, because there's just you're only exposed to a single asset, and so you put in one Bitcoin today. And you come back, 6 months later, and Rune's gone down in value relative to Bitcoin for some reason. You will still have your one BTC plus whatever yield you generated in that time frame. And so, I think that's kind of that feature is this feature is geared towards a person like yourself and what you're kind of the mindset of where you're kind of going down, because it becomes so simple for people to understand this feature, is because there's no two assets, there's no IL, there's no complicated math and ILP, blah, 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 all these things. All that basically goes away, and you're just I put in one BTC and I come back and I get more yield. And, Rune's price doesn't really matter all that much to me. Technically it does mathematically, because if Rune prices come down, that will affect your yield, but not your principal.
Okay. Yeah. I guess when I looked at, I think I started with putting in 0.005 Bitcoin, and now I see I'm able to withdraw 0.0039, whatever it is, and then I see in permanent loss protection it's been 96 or 97 days, and it doesn't quite get me to where the amount that I put in. And I don't know if it just needs those extra few days to kind of get back there. Am I understanding that correctly?
So just to clarify one thing real quick first, for anyone in here that might be like brand new, the single-sided LP stuff we were talking about a bit ago is like a future feature where you would only be exposed to the single asset.
Okay.
The single-sided LPing that you're seeing for the past year and today is not that. So the only thing that exists today is 50-50 LPing. And the single-sided adding, I like to just describe it as a convenience step. Basically, it's like you can enter from just Bitcoin, you can enter from just Rune, but you're really entering the Bitcoin Rune pool no matter what. So however you add in, the math really ends up the same. It's just whether you acquired those liquidity units from Bitcoin and Rune, Bitcoin or Rune. But you're all kind of in the same place no matter what. So what you're describing, like if you add just Bitcoin right now and Rune goes down more than Bitcoin, then you can definitely end up with less Bitcoin. Because what you're being protected against is that 50-50 start point. Another tip is if you kind of like, have you used THOReau to track your position? Yeah. So there should be a toggle where you can view an asymmetrical LP as a symmetrical. And I feel like that's a really good feature because then you can, then like what we were just talking about will make more sense because you can see it as if you added symmetrically. And then basically from that view, if your LP versus HODL is negative, that's your impermanent loss protection.
Okay.
And that's what's going up 1% per day until 100 days. So if you're 99 days in and your LP versus HODL is down $1,000 or whatever, then that's like, then at 100 days, you're going to be protected that, I mean, I'm saying it in dollar terms, obviously it's in like coin terms, but that's what your protection actually is.
Okay. All right, cool. Yeah, I guess I'll, part of it was, just trying to experience this and to understand it. And I'll see how things work out. I think I'll get a better understanding of that. I guess from the beginning, I just thought like, okay, I'll take this much Bitcoin, I'll put it in. I know it swaps for half a Rune, but I'll be able to pull that out no matter what because of the impermanent loss protection. But it sounds like because of that initial swap, I might not quite get the same because of the large drop in Rune, 100 days ago, from 100 days ago.
Yep, that's right. The protection is as if you added symmetrically. Another good way to play with it is there's also an LP calculator. There's one in LP University. There's one on THOReau where you can speculate on like price movements and APYs and things like that, and then put in like the time frame, and then you can see like, oh, would this be positive? Would this be negative? Would I need protection? Like, so you can kind of like strategize your LP before it using that.
Cool. Hey, thanks for the time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, man. I also pinned up a tweet from LPU. You can join their server. They have a really good, they have really good tutorials and explanations and teachers and stuff. A lot of them are here in this space. So if you want to learn more about LPing on THORChain, definitely join their Discord server and read some of their tutorials. And we also have Citizen up here. Just we'll keep it quick. We're gonna hop off in just a minute or two here. But hey, what's up, man?
Yeah, I guess this again has to do with onboarding new people to THORChain and Web3 generally. I think it was 2017, 2018 maybe, in Web3 conference, Gavin and Zaki and all the other founders that before blockchain even launched, they were giving speak to the developers. The young new developers or people that are just trying to get into blockchain back then, 2017, 2018, were raising hands and they were asking directly questions to Gavin and Zaki on different sessions. How do we get involved? And both of their answers were kind of politely, but still kind of shutting them down, basically saying we're not looking for junior developers, we're looking for senior developers. And I know that THORChain is known as like one of the most complex, many lines of code. It's hard to get into. So like for people that are trying to participate and contribute, and as Brad B said, it's really not for certain people about money or even technology. It's really about the idea and vision of what Web3, the sovereignty of Web3 brings to everybody. And that that simple notion of breaking from Web2 to Web3 has to permeate through general public. And we can't do that if we don't have a on-ramp entry points. And so when I see pardon me, like on site, like personal anecdote is in 25 years of my business, I'm retired. In 25 years of doing design and building, and from the architectural design, build, craft, I have found myself repeating myself as I went on and on every year at the same level. It's like being a professor, and I was a professor, and it's like, you get older, your knowledge and experience gets deeper, but yet the people that you're talking to, teaching, educating are at the same level. And so there has to be a system where there's the tier or tapering system of entry points for people to ramp up. And my heart goes out to Chad B and other founders when I hear them repeating things over and over and over again. And I wish THORChain had a venue where the entry people could be kind of informed in an easier way. Is there any other venues or channels, or what like a secret network does with their agents, or what Osmosis does with their Ministry of Marketing? Does the THORChain have anything that outside of the trio of you guys on YouTube and Twitter Space, that people at different levels of knowledge and expertise in Web3 could engage at different tiers?
So the THORChain, the core team, is very different than most other teams in the context of as the project gets bigger and more adopted and this kind of things, the intent is not to expand the team and get bigger as THOReau did that, for example. The intent is to keep things small, tight, and eventually just like get rid of the original team and just have it other teams kind of come out of nowhere and start building on the community. We're seeing that with a lot of different things. And so if you want to get involved in this ecosystem and the Web3 stuff, like you can either work a part of a new project within this particular ecosystem. You can try to apply for a job with possibly 9 realms if there's some sort of value add you can do there, which is what Familiar Cow did. But the core team itself will probably not be hiring anybody. We're trying to get rid of everybody rather than expand the team, in a sense. But yeah, start like also don't be afraid of like creating your own thing too. Like if you have an idea, something you could really do on the Web3 space that's really kind of interesting and innovative and whatever, like don't feel that you have to join somebody else. You can just start your own project and get other people to join you. Like
for example, like we pointed out LPU just before, that's a great example of a community that's born out of the THORChain space and continues to contribute great value to the ecosystem. And that's just all people who are passionate about this community and the ideals that are brought forth by THORChain. And there's 20,000 members in that Discord right now. Sorry, Chad had to hop, but we'll hang on for a couple minutes until we finish everyone's questions here. But Chad, you have some dead.
Yeah, on that, there's a lot of examples, right? Like you mentioned, LP University. There's Runebase. There's THORnoob. There's other, and a lot of these, like you can even potentially apply for treasury funding from THORChain if you're doing something that adds a lot of value to THORChain. So I think a key thing is like, and Chad was kind of saying this, is like THORChain in the way it operates almost has more in common with like Bitcoin than it has in common with like how Terra has been with like, building the team and stuff like that. Like THORChain is just a bunch of people and teams like working on this thing that exists. And the goal is not for there to be like even how Chad B says, like, he doesn't want to be seen as the leader, the founder, like the guy with the story and like, be the Vitalik, be the Do Kwon, he clearly has no interest in stuff like that. But people are just working on this stuff. And I think another thing that's important to touch on is you were saying like, THORChain is very complicated. You need a lot of developer experience. Myself and Familiar Cow, who's speaking from the THORChain account right now, are both really good examples of getting involved and having and not being able to write a single line of code, right? Like neither of us are technical people. Neither of us really understand like the true ins and outs of what's happening on the protocol level. But what we do understand is what this can do for people and for users and the importance of it in the space. So we can talk about it. We can write about it. We can make videos, tutorials. We do marketing. If you're a graphic designer, you could make infographics. Like all of these projects need support in 1,000 different ways beyond just coding. I mean, obviously the true builders and the coders are kind of like the rock stars of the space, but there's so much more that's needed. And I think everyone can kind of figure out like what their previous skills could do if applied to Web3 or applied to THORChain. Like there's so many other value adds and so many places, so many things that are lacking. And I think that's like what you described is the same reason why myself and Familiar Cow like started doing all this. We started hosting spaces. Like Familiar Cow joined 9 Realms. I joined THORswap, started making tutorials, education, because we see there is a lot of fragmentation because it is decentralized, but you know, everyone can just kind of like try their best to do the stuff. Or even back to the website, it's like the website, it's not like the core team just like made an official website, right? It's more like the community just has to figure this stuff out as best as everyone can. So,
yeah, I mean, from my end, like I started out just making THORChain sneakers as NFTs and selling those to the community. And then I started doing Twitter Spaces with THOReau, and that's kind of evolved to this weekly update space with Chad B on Fridays. So I mean, yeah, it's not like we organically just created this stuff, and that's just how things are made in this community, because everything is just done by community members, and things aren't done by the core team or 9 Realms. It's just done by people in the community. So we just happen to, have the interest to, build this thing. And we have fun doing it. So that's why we do it. So anyone can do this. Anyone can start hosting Twitter Spaces and invite us if you do, because we'd love to show up and have a good time.
I just did.
Sweet, man. We have Breton up here too. Hey.
Yeah, guys, everything y'all are talking about is really cool. So I saw the movie last night. It was really good. I thought Christian Bale did a really good job. I thought, the runtime wasn't an issue for me as far as, how it played a part. I gave it an 8.5 out of 10. I thought it wasn't as good as Thor Ragnarok, but I still really enjoyed it. I don't know why the internet is shitting on the movie. The goats were fucking hilarious. I mean, just such a good time. Excited for more. But yeah, man, I loved it. I loved Taika Waititi. I think he's a great director. Again, Christian Bale, such a good villain. I wish they would have shown more of him. And yeah, just can't wait for the next one. Seriously, it's like a 69 on Rotten Tomatoes right now. Like, what the fuck is that? It should definitely be at least like a 79, 80. I don't know what critics are watching. I had an amazing time. Natalie Portman still got it going on. She's kind of banging still. Like, you can kind of see the age on her like face and stuff. Like, she's definitely not Padme anymore, but like, she can kind of get it for a girl that's got cancer in this movie. Like, damn, I'd hit it, even though she's in stage 4. Like, let's go. So, yeah, those are my thoughts. If anybody else has got any thoughts on it, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, man, don't spoil it. I haven't seen it yet. I do like Christian Bale though, so you can't go wrong with that.
He's great. He's great.
Sweet. Thanks for coming up. All right. Yeah, we'll wrap up here. Thanks, everybody. See you next Friday.
See ya.